Hello and welcome to First Flight, a Star Trek Enterprise rewatch podcast where we are watching and discussing each episode of Enterprise in succession.
First Flight is a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions Network.
This is Commander Tucker of Enterprise. We've got some information you're going to want to hear.
Welcome, Enterprise fans. I'm your co-host, Chris.
And I'm your co-host, Abby.
And tonight, we are discussing Exile, the 6th episode of Season 3. Exile was written by Phyllis Strong and directed by the Roxanne Dawson.
Yip, yay! Yip, yip, for sure.
Exile aired on October 15th, 2003. But before we begin our discussion, we need to issue a read alert.
Tactical alert. All hands to stations.
There are potential spoilers ahead. We might end up talking about any part of the series at any time, so you have been warned. And now, for a summary of this episode, it's time for the Captain's Log. Okay, Abby, let's get poetic.
Captain Starlog Supplemental.
Please, what is a poem?
Poetry is an art form that uses words put together in new and unexpected ways, sometimes in rhyme.
All right, so I had the haiku for this one, and I found it. There was a lot I wanted to get in here, so let's see if it does it justice. So here we go. Hoshi's mind attracts. Brilliance does not mean I'm yours. 50 spheres made this?
Ooh.
Punctuation for you in there, including the interrobang, the question mark exclamation point, which might be my favorite grammar word ever, because interrobang is just such a cool word.
It sounds like the weapon of, like, one of Batman's weapons.
Yeah, it does.
He created the interrobang to fight the Riddler.
Yeah, or like interrogation. So like, bang! Yeah. It's a weapon that makes you truthful at the same time.
It's when you punch someone in the face during an interrogation.
There you go, the interrobang.
I'm pretty sure Jack Bauer used it.
That's fantastic. But either way, I think it's appropriate for that because that was quite the reveal at the end of this episode. It deserved an interrobang.
Yeah, but I really like your first line. Hoshi's mind attracts for two reasons, because that's part of the plot, but also one thing that is attractive about Hoshi is her mind. She's so brilliant and inquisitive and curious, and like she enjoys her off time reading an alien novel.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's awesome.
That she has to translate. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. All right, well, it's time to deploy our subspace amplifiers and get into this episode. Of course, we always will start with a quick chat about the cold open and then head into our pros and decons section. Each of us will share 3 of our favorite parts of the episode, and then I'm pretty sure there's going to be some things that don't quite gel with us, so we'll have discussion about any decons from the episode. You might hear a dog bark in this discussion if somebody's Porthos Pick is mentioned, but we'll still discuss them later on.
All right, well, let's get into it. Like you said, we always start with that cold open, and this one has an interesting one. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on how the episode starts?
Yeah, I had a very short set of notes. Creepy voice and Shadow Man. Is this another Sub Rosa?
Right? No candles in sight.
No candles, but there is a crystal later. But it's this creepy, alluring male voice calling to this woman. And if I didn't know the episode already, that's what I would be thinking, like, oh my gosh, another Sub Rosa. But it is cool to see Hoshi just in her room and seeing like a bathroom the way we would have one today, not like a pull-out drawer where the water just comes out, and it doesn't look like a functional bathroom in like TNG or Voyager. Yeah. This looks like a real bathroom, so that was kind of cool.
No, I agree, and I really like how this is just like a normal snapshot of Hoshi, right? Like looks like she's getting ready for bed. She's in her little shorts and a tank top. She's just getting comfy. She's wearing a headband, a big white headband. I wear big white headbands all the time, and because they're useful, like they're get your hair out of your face, they keep it away from like if she needs to be really listening to something, her ears are free, and they're just comfortable, right? And I was just like, yes, Hoshi rocking my headband style. I really appreciate that. But again, she's braless.
Okay, but being married to a woman and working with tons of teachers who will just say the randomest things around a male coworker because I'm the only one usually.
Right.
The bra comes off the moment you come home or as soon as possible, right? So I was like, okay, I forgive it. She's at home and there's not trip in there. Like, you know what I mean? Like she's alone at home at night, getting ready to go to bed. I'm okay with it. It didn't zoom in. It didn't do all the usual things with the paw. And it was only in like one shot that you saw anything. So
she was chilly at one point.
Yes.
And yes, I forgive it. I forgive it because of exactly what you said. Yes, this feels like she's getting ready to go to bed. She's washing her face. She's probably gonna brush her teeth next, like whatever.
Yep.
And I'll forgive that. It's just like, it's one of those times where it's like, if the rest of the episode had more undergarments, I wouldn't have even brought it up. But this is a whole episode where there's a lot of lack of undergarments. So we start off that way from the get-go. Thanks, UPN. So,
okay, so I legit don't remember ever seeing any cold Hoshi evidence in the dresses she wears later, but you're saying there is?
There's a tiny bit of it, but it's, well, we'll get into that later.
Okay.
So if I was going somewhere around somebody that I didn't trust I would wear more clothing. I
would be in uniform. You're on an away mission.
Yeah, unless I'm in my pajamas.
Yeah.
And not heels, but we'll get to that when we get later on in some decons. But I'm not a heel person in general. So, anyways, but I like it. It's mysterious. It sets the tone. This is going to be a Hoshi heavy episode, and I really like that she calls Malcolm. Like right away, we get that Malcolm Hoshi, and that's one of those relationships that we don't see a ton in the series. But when we do, I really like it. All the way back from her teaching her how to aim her phase pistol back in early season 1. They have these moments, and it was nice. Like, of course she's going to call him. Of course, he's going to respond and be like, Hoshi, you okay? Like, what's up? Like, it's that trust that they have after years of being together, and that closeness that we'll see later on when they talk on the bridge. And I liked that right away, because you know what? How many times have we said it? Malcolm Reed is good at his job. If there's some weird, creepy voice talking to me, I wouldn't mind having Malcolm Reed come up and save me. Like, he'd do a good job.
Well, and he's very, not outside of the cold open, he's very considerate of her.
Yes.
And like talks her through it. But another connection to Beverly Crusher, because Sub Rosa, this scene also reminded me of Cause and Effect, where Beverly's hearing the voices as she's ready to go to sleep. And then she's talking with Geordi and Data later about not sensing anything on the sensors. So there's a lot of parallels here to some top tier Trek. Maybe not Sub Rosa, but now that's an infamous episode that's actually better. It's better than the conversation, or the conversation is shifting around Sub Rosa. But Cause and Effect is definitely top tier Trek.
Yeah. Well, and I also thought as I'm watching this that of course there's all the Beauty and the Beast to the general, ethos out there, but this also reminded me of Alter Ego from Voyager, where Tuvok and Harry meet Morena, she turns out to be the alien in the nebula keeping it from exploding.
Yeah.
She's lonely, and she's reaching out to somebody else who has a mind that fascinates her because she's lonely. And that, while I would not consider that top tier Trek, I love Tuvok, and I like that episode. It's a very comforting episode for me. I just rewatched it recently, actually. And you get choked by a Polynesian guy in a mask with a lei and a little Hawaiian, like it's got some
Hawaiians unite.
There's a lot of Hawaii in Star Trek now that I think about it. But
well, yeah, you just made me connect it again to another Voyager mini plot. All of Janeway's Jane Eyre holo novel with "Don't go on the fourth floor," and this is "Don't go outside." And
Yep.
there's the music and the creepiness and the dress, and it's just like, oh man, this is definitely like a subgenre of Star
Yeah.
Trek.
And I think, like, yeah, this episode, it pulls pieces from a lot of other ones, which makes
Mhm.
it both good and not good. Because I'm not sure there's a ton of original in this, but it flows like a classic Star Trek episode, which is nice. And you get that all the way from the beginning. I mean, this is a classic cold open.
True. All right, that's a good way to settle our talk on the cold open because you're right. This felt comfortable,
Hmm.
whereas Extinction didn't. This felt comfortable.
Agreed. Agreed. And it's is it what I want to? Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Let's go to some positives. Okay. Let's start off with some pros. So we've been kind of dancing around the bigger ideas of this one. So hit us up with something you loved about this episode.
Yeah, that might be our longest cold open discussion for one.
Maybe.
But yeah, so my first pro is the sphere plot. This is something that's
Mhm.
unique and different, adding to the textures of this episode. Whereas, like you said, a lot of this episode comes from different stories in the franchise. This is unique to Enterprise. And again, like I've been saying this whole season, it's layering on the mystery of the Xindi and now the mystery of the spheres. Because before it was just one curiosity, but now there's a definite like intentionality to 50 plus spheres reshaping space. So
Yeah.
to start in that beginning scene with T'Pol and Archer in the command center, and then her just logicking the way through figuring out there has to be a second sphere and then more spheres once they get more sensor data. I love the away mission that Archer and Trip go on to the sphere and the shuttle pod floating away. All that stuff is really disconnected from the story we're telling with Hoshi, but connecting to the rest of the season, and it just makes you want to know more.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it because it is. It's like you peel off a layer and you find six more, which is both exciting and frustrating at the same time because you're like, wait a minute, I thought oh, never mind. And I like that we see Archer and T'Pol both really this is never out of their minds. Like even when other things are going on,
Yep.
they're in the command center, they're going through the data, it's keeping
Mhm.
them up, they're trying different theories. Like this is the part of the mission that is interesting without being threatening at this point almost like
Yes.
they're trying
Yes.
to figure it out. The Xindi are the threat at this point, so we think. They
Hmm.
don't, and the fact that Archer is making that first connection of maybe somebody is doing this on purpose, like there's that first kernel in there, and seeing all those layers and all the different spheres when they pop up at the map at the end, you're just like, oh wow, this is the first quarter of this season, isn't it? And it is such a neat thing. And I love the spheres. I love the idea of them. I like the look of them. I like how much we get to play around on the sphere this time. Like
Hmm.
it's really neat. And I like how we go back and forth really quickly with the people on Enterprise, and then when the shuttle is going and they're correcting and they're finding the edges, like it's just a good scene of our crew really working together to figure this out. And I also like when you get that little maybe 15 seconds when Archer and Trip have been inside the the sphere dampening field and they haven't heard from them for a while, and you see the bridge and you see
Hmm.
T'Pol pacing, you
Yes.
see Travis and he just looks so anxious and
Yeah.
he's like clutching. And then Malcolm, you can even see he's got one hand on the top of his console and he's like tapping his fingers with nervous energy. And it's very short, it's very subtle. Nobody talks but T'Pol, but that's our crew right there, worrying about them while they're inside the sphere. I really liked that moment.
I love it too. And it's subtle, right? There's not
Uh-huh.
lines, it's all acting.
Mm-hmm.
Going back though to that initial conversation in the command center, where it seems like people are in there all the time. Like Hoshi's in there sometimes, and everyone's just going in there as whenever they can in their off hours. But
Yep.
I love that T'Pol says the simulation suggests that the anomalies occur where the waves intersect. And then Archer's like, so we can predict when we're gonna get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
the initial um thrust for this mission. Like, we can protect ourselves because we can't coat our ship with Trellium because that'll hurt T'Pol, but we can avoid the anomalies. And
Mhm.
so like the the pursuing of this mystery is organic. It has nothing to do with Xindi, like you said. This is just, can we keep ourselves safe? But then it leads to larger questions. And I love when our characters are sitting in a room thinking, running
Yeah.
simulations, doing
Yep.
math. Like,
Yep.
this was very TNG like. Um, and I appreciated that part of the storyline.
It is a great way to start us off, because that is one of the things about this episode that I think really people forget, because this is probably not going to make a lot of people's top 10 of season 3 list. But if
No.
you don't watch this one, you miss
Yeah.
so much important information and the continuation of the story and the plot and all of that with the spheres, because big stuff happens here. And you know what, they needed a reason for them not to be able to stay with Hoshi. So the
Hmm.
finding out about the spheres is that reason. More
Hmm.
power to it, because
Hmm.
that's that connection to the bigger narrative. It doesn't stand out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, it makes it all worth it because it's
Mm-hmm.
leading to the shipment. That the
Mm-hmm.
last line in the episode, I'm like, the shipment, yeah.
I know, and you're just like, can we keep going?
Yep.
All right. Well, for my first one, I can keep us on the sphere for a little bit of this. I wanted to talk about, and this is something I've been noticing more and more as we go through, and you're not going to be surprised when you hear me call it out, but I really liked how this is not an Archer episode. This is obviously a Hoshi episode,
Sure.
but we see Archer's relationships with multiple other people in really nice ways in this episode, like
Mm.
duos and some trios. Like, okay, so we've already talked about the command center and him and T'Pol and all their discussion and their back and forth. And like, I love when he says, so we could make a map of this, and he's got that little like half smile through the rest of
Hmm.
that scene once he realizes T'Pol figured something out. And it's that you don't see Archer smile a ton in this season, because it's
Yeah.
very grim and very intense, and it's not a full-on smile, it's not his charming smile, but it's there, like, and it feels, you can feel that room get lighter, you can feel them working together, and that cohesion that they have now, and that scaffolding of each other and the ideas and all that. It makes everything a little lighter.
This episode is definitely a breather
Yeah.
for the Archer character, right? He's a
Yes.
lot calmer.
Mm-hmm. But he's got the intensity in there still, because one of the other moments that I liked when we see him and Hoshi twice really have deep multi-layered discussions in this. First,
Hmm.
when they're debating in the ready room about if she could stay, and like, this is, is this an acceptable risk, and blah blah blah. And then later when he says goodbye to her, and this is where you see they've known each other for a very long time. They
Hmm.
have a friendship as well as rank. They have personal connections here, and we saw that all the way back in season 1 when she was so nervous and like she almost left, and that's even brought up. Tarkin brings that up later on, and Archer knows all this. So when she says, I can do this, I can handle this, I'm okay with this, he takes it differently than he would with other people, because that's a big statement from Hoshi, and you see him absorb that, and there's like a half a beat in there where that's Archer the man understanding what his friend is telling him, not Archer the captain. And it's
Hmm.
interesting because she can appeal to him in both those ways, because they have that pre-existing relationship. And then you see that even more later on when he's leaving her there, and she says, I need a minute. Tarkin steps aside, and he's like, I don't have to tell you to stay on your toes, right? Like, this is them as people as well as the captain. Did you bring a phase pistol, like all this? And it's one of those times that, and I think about it like when I am a parent saying, okay, I know you can do this, and I know this is going to probably be fine, and it's just me being overprotective, but let's double check that you did everything you need to do. That's what you do with people you care about. And
Yeah.
it's that one extra little step there. And Hoshi brings a levity when she says goodbye to him, like, oh, I'll sleep with the face pistol under my pillow. Like, she's telling him that she'll be okay, and adding that little bit of lightness so he understands that this is not, she feels she has to, she feels that she can. And
Exactly.
that's a whole different layer there. So that is beautiful. And then we also get a little part of Archer and Trip's relationship when they're in the shuttle and he's like, yeah, I'm going to land on this sphere. And Trip's like, okay. And then when they're trying to shoot the shuttle down because Trip almost does it and he goes, careful, you almost hit the O2 sensor, sir. And Archer shoots him this look through the helmet of seriously. But that's that buddy relationship
Yeah.
that we don't see a ton in this season. And when we do, it feels so nice. It is a breather. It's a moment for him to just be with his friend in a way, because nobody else would really have said it that way. Malcolm sure wouldn't have. So it's just nice to see those coming out and to see the writers and the actors being able to play that because of all the history that's gone before. And I like seeing that Archer in this episode. It does, like you said, it stands out because it's a breather for him. He doesn't have to be super intense action, moralistic judgment. He's just continuing the mission with people he knows and trusts. And
This
it's a really nice part of
episode,
it.
yeah, and this episode isn't end of the world, Archer. This
Right.
is let's get some information. And I also need my crewman back too, Hoshi.
Yeah,
So,
by the
so
way.
there's stakes, but it's not the same stake of saving the world, shouldering the world. And you don't feel that same weight on his shoulders and in the performance of Scott Bakula. So that's a great pick. I love
Thank
that
you.
you've captured all those little relationships in that one pick. That's a good one. By the way, your Hoshi pick in this one is the fourth time we've picked Hoshi this entire season.
Oh. Well, she's got a lot coming up.
Yes.
We'll put it that way.
Yes.
And I think she'll get a couple more tonight still.
I think so.
All right, so let's bring it on to your second pro then.
Yeah, why don't we bring another Hoshi in now? Because this is Hoshi and Archer. And you kind of hit on this already, but I'm zeroing in on one specific aspect of the relationship. Often in Star Trek, a character is seeing something and they're not sure if it's real themselves and they're afraid of telling other people. And so they don't. And then something goes awry, but then they start telling people and people don't believe them. And it's frustrating for us, the audience. Archer doesn't quite believe her, but he trusts her and posts security across the ship and goes to a planet just on her word. He takes them off their critical save the world mission based off of the word of Hoshi Sato. That's a leader. And that is a great relationship there, put at the forefront. And again, it made me connect with Michael and Tilly when Tilly is seeing May, right? Michael's like, this is Star Trek. Things like this happen all the time. I've watched the episodes, right? Not really, but okay, yeah, space.
Weird stuff happens. Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't Voyager, but still, it could be weird.
Stuff gets freaky.
Yeah.
Voyager.
But yeah, so I really just loved the trust he has. Even Phlox is like, you're hallucinating. That's cool. I wish I could. And Reed's like, there's nothing there. I'm not going to belittle you. He's not kind of condescending, but he's like, there's nothing there. And Archer's like, no, post security.
Yeah.
Take her at her word.
Well, that's in my notes exactly like that too. It says, glad Archer believes her and sets up guards. And when he says, in this place, who knows when Malcolm goes guards and expecting an attack. But that trust that's there. And Hoshi doesn't continue to hammer home a point and really stand up like that if it's not important. So the fact that she's really doing that, he knows. And I'll come back to this a little bit later with one of my pros. Well, when I get to it next, probably. But I really enjoyed that sickbay scene because, first of all, here's people that we talked about. Malcolm's like a big brother to her in this, here and on the bridge. And that's just so nice. And he's gentle and he's keeping an eye out too. Nobody says they don't believe her. And Archer has the ability to make her feel listened to just by doing some simple things like this. And that is such a powerful thing when you feel like you are being seen and heard and what you are saying is resonating, it's sinking in, it's having an effect. And that is, if some security guards stand outside and she gets monitored by Phlox for a little while and nothing would have happened, it would have been fine too. It was just that amount of respect that he gave right back to her, and the belief, and you know what? If you wasted a few resources, who cares? Because you matter, and what you say and think and believe matters. And it's small and it's subtle, but it's important.
Totally. Yep. So that's my second pro. What's your next pro?
All right. Well, I was going to do this third, but I'm going to pull it into second because I think it fits better here. I'm giving us another check on our Hoshi box too here.
All right.
I like how this is definitely a major Hoshi episode, right? And we've had a few of those here and there. And they're not always the ones that you go, this is the very best Star Trek in the world. But I love how the consistency of Hoshi and the number of times this episode refers back to other things that we know about Hoshi already, or those of us who have watched the series obsessively know are coming. It's a beautiful middle point of Hoshi's growth. And I've always felt like Hoshi is very much a stand-in for how, I mean, I'm not brilliant like her, but I would be anxious like her on a ship.
Yes.
I feel like I grow with her. And now that we're in this third season and we've done this for a while, we are braver, we're bolder, we're ready to do things we wouldn't have been able to do a couple of years before. And she's grown into herself, into the position, into her relationships. And it's beautiful. I mean, her and Phlox, we always talk about this. Every time they're together, the trust, she's feeding the animals. I love that she loves the menagerie as much as Phlox does. That he talks to her about, you think you're reacting poorly to stress and you're seeing things. That connects back to Vanishing Point where, she saw all sorts of stuff and all that. I love that when she tried the crystal egg thing later on, all the different parts of Hoshi's journey that you saw in there. I mean, we saw the silent enemy alien pop his head up, which is cool. We saw the moon blow up when they did their first test on breaking the ice. We saw, we see all of that. And then that last look from Dolim at the end is intense. Yes. And we know that's coming. Like the connections to the Hoshi's story in that montage are enormous. There's dozens of them in there, which is supposed to be the point, but it's also a beautiful connection and continuity to the canon we have of Hoshi, and the fact that she is so smart and like she makes big, quick decisions when it comes down to you decide the fate of the Enterprise, the universe, of whatever. That's fine. She can do that. We see that later when she tries to throw herself off the edge when they find out that she's been adding layers to the code. Like when it comes down to it, she will pick up that crystal egg and use it as a threat. She will throw herself off. She will sacrifice herself or do what she needs to do to save everybody else. And that is such a Hoshi moment. Like she steps up. She has that in her. And she's smart enough to think about 4 steps ahead really quickly and know what she needs to do or try to do to make this better. And it's such a nice look at Hoshi. And it's such a middle point in her journey. And I like that they took the time to highlight it. I like the time they took to focus on little bits of her character in a way that didn't feel like, hey, we know this about Hoshi. It was very natural, these connections and the evolution. And it was nice to see that. I mean, all the backstory to her grandparents and her language loving and all that. It's just nice to see a fuller picture of Hoshi in this one, because a lot of times she doesn't get that. So I wanted to make sure to call that out.
Yeah, and as you were talking, it really hit me that in this episode, and really always, Hoshi is never playing the victim.
Nope.
We get a lot of victimized T'Pol.
Yes.
We don't get a lot of victimized Hoshi in the same way. And I love that. Because this episode could have gone a whole different, even worse way, right?
Yes.
And they stayed away from that, luckily. And Hoshi was just guarded, open, but guarded, right? And suspicious, but
smart.
Strong. Like
she was smart.
Yes, willing to do what she needs to do for the mission, but she's only gonna go so far.
Yeah, exactly. And it's nice to see her being portrayed as coming into her own power like that. And it would have been great if we had seen that with a different character, but for her, it's all that more powerful because we've been with it on this journey.
Yeah, we often have in media, like, we need the badass woman and she's kicking butt and everything. Hoshi is, but she doesn't have to do it by kicking butt. She just holds up
Exactly.
this crystal and says, I will
Hmm.
do this. I will
Yep.
destroy your access to the universe
Yep.
if you don't let me go. It's as simple
Yep.
as that.
And there's no romance. Like,
Hmm.
there's no romance in
Hmm.
here. And that's really, really nice because she is not being defined by her romantic relationship.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, she's being asked to be a companion and like whatever Tarkin thinks that might entail, but that is never even a fleeting thought here for her. And that is really nice to see because while romantic relationships are a big part of anybody's lives,
Yep.
that's not the focus. And it would feel massively out of place in the middle of this giant critical earth saving mission to be like, oh, I need a romance. So I'm so glad they stayed away from that. It not the time or the place.
Totally agree.
All right, bring us into number 3. What do you got for us?
Well, it's kind of where I was just going. Hoshi's strength to resist the alien and hit him where it hurts by threatening to break the crystal. Just that
Oh yeah.
scene. You know, she's first of all saving her entire crew,
Yep.
but also not allowing herself to be manipulated because he's
Yes.
trying to manipulate her at that moment. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Tarquin is a good character because you can feel bad for him. He's been exiled by his people because he's different. What?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what he says.
Mm-hmm.
So, there could be some unreliable narrator there, but let's just take his word for what it is. So he's banished to live alone and has an extremely long lifespan.
Yeah.
And he just wants connection. He's not
Yep.
asking for anything else from her. Not the physical, none of that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. He wants her mind. I love how he says it's been a privilege to know
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So like there's good aspects to him. I think his mind is warped. His methods are unethical because of his loneliness, right? So you can empathize with him, but also, and that's why like I like that Hoshi in that moment, she's not being cruel, she's not trying to beat him up or kill him. She's just setting her boundaries very clearly and saying, here's what will happen if you cross the line.
Mm-hmm.
You might keep me here, but then what?
Mm-hmm.
And if you want other people to come, don't trick them next time. Be upfront, be open. Like she's
And
giving
it
him
was like, I'll
advice.
remember that. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, she made him a better person.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
he is better in the end because he still gives them information, even though he didn't get anything out of it except for the privilege of knowing her. What a
Yeah.
great, you know, there's a lot familiar about this kind of plot, but I feel like they did resolve it in not a unique way, but in a very satisfying way. Not so satisfying that like, oh, I really want to watch this a lot. But it was satisfying because it was different and it centered on Hoshi freeing herself with her mind and by setting a strong boundary for herself.
Beautifully put. And it dovetails perfectly into my third pro,
Well, look at
which
that.
is I know, right? We're just cool like that. Which is talking about how we have an antagonist in this episode who is polymorphic. Like
Yes.
he's technically the bad guy. I mean,
Hmm.
Darkin is not a nice guy in his actions, but he's also not a bad guy. He's desperately lonely.
He's a tragic
He's yes, he's
character. Yeah.
tragic. And that's exactly the right kind of antagonist for this season of Enterprise, for Enterprise in general. Like, he's not all good, all bad. If he was a mustache twirling villain, or he was looking, desperately for a romantic partner, it would play differently. But he's not. He
He
just
he's not Shinzaning Deanna,
no,
right?
no, exactly.
There's none of that going on. That's what I'm saying. Like this could have gone a certain way, and it didn't go that way. I'm so thankful that it didn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like that. Like in the end, when he does, he comes back on and he says, I don't want you to be harmed. Like, I understand why you didn't and couldn't stay
Hmm.
with me. And he even knows she's right. Like, deep down, he knows. Like, he's hoping she'll make a different choice, but he
Hmm.
knows she's right. And for him to come back and to see her finish the book and give that little bit, it's almost like an apology, but going, well, I had to try. I mean, you're the first chance I had in over a century. I had to try. And you feel so bad for him. And I wonder to myself, like, obviously he's banished. We'll take him at his word. He was banished for being one in the 50 million who is telepathic. They put him in like a big old castle with like 12 different chunks in a so they obviously didn't want him to be wasting away in a cave to nothing, but
it's still a prison.
Exactly. A gilded cage is still a cage. So like you feel bad for this, and he's got to be so bored, like on top of it all. He's got to just be going out of his mind, bored. And when you don't talk to anybody else for a long time, like solitary confinement in prisons, it's considered torture because that lack of interaction changes you. It changes how you do interact with people later. It changes what you're willing to do to get connection, to get interaction, to have more than just yourself. And when you think about him as that, like if anyone is a victim in this story, it's kind of him. And hurt people. And it's just, to be ostracized for being different is a massive Trek theme through all of Trek, and is something that we need lessons on all the time. So while is this my favorite type of story? No, but it was, like we've said over and over, it was done in a way that was done without having any of that icky romance in it. And it was done as just people who are lonely. And he brings up over and over again, you're alone, you're lonely, you're solitude. Like, this is what he's focusing on. And he's trying to help somebody else. He's trying to help Hoshi and say, you're surrounded by people, but you're alone. I know what it's like to be alone, and I know how that affects you. Don't be like that. I'm offering you a different way. And then he respects her finally. I mean, she has to tell him, don't cross that line. But I mean, he comes back and says, yeah, you're right. And I'm still going to help you because it's the right thing to do. So he's just so polymorphic, polychromatic. And I love that aspect of it. It makes you think more about this in different ways. And that's the mark of a good antagonist.
Well, and you just watch the actor's eyes.
Yeah.
He tells the whole story and how his head's often dipped down and he's looking up just through the prosthetics. There's sadness all the time.
He's so sad.
So it's a good character. Like, not an episode I want to watch a lot, but they did what they set out to do and they did it well. And if this was like Voyager, like they would have left a shuttle for him or something, right? Because Voyager has endless shuttles. But like that would be a solution for this. Give him mobility. Give him the ability and the choice to go out and not wait for the 1 in a trillion minds out there that are compatible. Okay, so let's now move on to the decons, the parts of the episode that just didn't really gel with us. I think we've hinted at some of it, but here we go. Abby, let's start with you. What are some of the decons for you about Exile?
Okay, so I have one kind of bigger one that I'll save for the end, and then just like a whole bunch of tiny little things that make me go, huh. So, okay, first of all, we have the second time in 3 episodes where somebody finally gets to communicate after, a time of being out of communication, and they're in a dire situation and they're like, why don't you come and get me? Instead of, oh my God, this guy is trying to keep me here forever. Did that just think it's time to come and get me? No, come. He's crossed the line. This is getting icky. Come now, like fast as you can. Let's go. Like, it's the same thing when Archer called back when we were doing Impulse, and he's like, yeah, fix that shuttle quickly. No, this is where nobody's gonna be surprised if you say this is not going well now. There's just not enough urgency in that communication, and that just makes me go, okay.
I knew you were going to talk about that.
Well, it just feels out of place. I mean, after that big confrontation with the egg and everything, come on. Like, nope, I need you to come get me right now. Like, that's all she would have had to. I think it's time to come and get me now. Like, one word. That would have been all it needed.
Yeah.
Okay. And we alluded to this before. Why did she pick the tiny little sundress with teeny straps, very short, high heels? Like, if you're going into this situation and you don't know if you trust this person, first of all, if things go south, you're not running in heels.
Nope.
So bring your boots, bring your sneakers, bring your flats at least. Like, I mean, Linda Park is stunning. She is a beautiful woman. I do not mind looking at her dressed like that. I just don't think it's practical. She should have been in uniform the whole time, or at least like just not heels and more undergarments. And just, if you don't want this guy to think that this is going to be anything, maybe just put on a cardigan. Maybe I'm just old, but
no,
anyway.
I mean it's very true. That's one of my decons too. So I'll just jump in there. Why would Hoshi wander the creepy guy's house in a tight dress?
And he never changes. I mean, I don't know. Maybe his species wears the same clothes for a long time, but like she's got a lot of. And when she's later on, when she's getting ready for bed and she's, laying on the bed reading the book or whatever, she's back in her little tank top and shorts. So like we know that's what she enjoys when she's being comfortable. So I would have been fine with her walking around in a tank top and shorts. Just
or a robe that he set out for her, and she has her uniform, undies underneath that. That's cool. But did she took the time to pack dresses?
I know, right? And heels.
What you said before is really interesting too, about if you don't want to suggest that something's going to happen here, don't dress like you're suggesting that.
Correct.
Which is,
and I'm not saying
iffy ground to be on, right?
Right.
But it is truth. There is truth to that kind of mentality. Dress for the situation you intend to be in and the signals that you're putting out, because we are all putting out signals.
Right.
To others, and she needs to be very clear with their signal, because even Archer's like, this is not appropriate. Right? So she's gonna come back with some dresses.
I know. And I'm not saying that anyone ever asks for anything because of what they're wearing. I just think it's impractical. And we just talked about how smart Hoshi is and about how she's ready, and so if you're ready, that's not what I would have packed.
Regardless of all of that, historically, Star Trek, when they go on away missions, no matter how long it is, they remain in their uniform. That uniform, she during the day, when she's not sleeping, she should have her uniform on. She's on an official, professional away mission. It's not shore leave.
Yep. I agree. All right, so I got a few more of these little ones. All right, so Tarkin tells her, don't go outside. The winds are really rough, right? Okay, if you really don't want her to go outside, would you not lock the door? Like, she just kind of opens it and walks in. She's like, oh yeah, well, look at that, graves. If you don't want her to see that, lock the door. And if she comes in later and she goes, it's kind of, weird that this door is locked, like, oh, I just really didn't want you out there with the winds. Like, I get it, plot, and it's important for her to see that, but come on.
Or he can make her see anything.
Yeah.
So when she walks out there, make the grave sites not be visible to her.
Right.
Done.
Yeah.
Or make the door not visible to her. There is no door there.
Yeah, exactly. Or you look out and it's the edge of the cliff. Like, it doesn't even have to look like it's the little graveyard garden or whatever. It just, yeah. And I know, plot, but. Okay, here's another one. So Archer and Trip, they're standing on the sphere. They're shooting down the shuttle, right? They get it. The thing comes falling and tumbling. It stops 3 inches from they don't run. Like, you didn't know that wasn't going to crush you. Like, I understand you're in EV suits and the magnetized boots and running is not fast. All the more reason to pick up your feet and back up before the shuttle gets within 3 inches of you. Like, I don't want to be crushed by the shuttle, just saying. And they look at each other like, "Ooh, that was close." And I'm like, "Well, it was a lot closer because you didn't back up." Come on.
Okay, so that's one of my decons too.
Oh, good.
Not that, but should the shuttle come tumbling back that way? Its momentum was taking it away from the sphere, so shouldn't it just keep on going? Or does the sphere have gravity?
The sphere has gravity. They wouldn't need boots, like their magnet boots, right?
Exactly. Or even
I know
if
the
it
sphere
had
has gravity inside.
Well, even if it has enough density to have some kind of gravity, right? Like a
Hmm.
small moon or a comet or something like that.
Right.
Is it enough to yank that thing down, even though it was moving away? So it seemed like the physics of that situation was like on a planet.
Yeah.
But would that one
Yep.
thruster be enough to knock the whole thing up? I'm sure that's several tons, that shuttle pod, right? Just a
Exactly.
one
Why
little
you don't want to be
thruster.
crushed by it.
Well, that too, but just the physics of the scene didn't work for
Yeah.
me. It was a
Yeah.
cool tension moment for it to be bouncing like a soda can towards it. Maybe that's
Yep.
why they weren't afraid. Hey, look how light that is. It's like a piece of aluminum.
Yeah, I suppose. Or we can stop it if we just put our gloves up and think real hard.
Hmm.
Use the force, but
Wesley.
there you go, right? Okay. So I've got two more, and one is not going to surprise anybody, and then one is like the bigger one. So, okay. I'm hoping that Anthony Montgomery had the flu or something this week because we talk about Travis.
Hmm.
We discuss Travis. Travis doesn't, he's not piloting when the anomalies all hit in the beginning. This is why I think
Hmm.
maybe he had the flu. There's some random guy there, right? We don't even see Travis for more than like one, maybe two scenes, and he doesn't even talk. So if he has no lines this entire episode. So if Hoshi really is, it would have taken one scene. Like he could have had dinner with her and she could have talked about, what she's hearing and seeing. And that would have been perfect to fit in with the Malcolm and Phlox and Archer of it because we know that they're friends. And like, I just felt so bad for Travis because we talk about how important he is and he's not there and he doesn't
Hmm.
get to talk. Like,
Hmm.
and wouldn't it have made sense for Travis to have been the one that went with Trip into the sphere? I mean, I know Archer's a pilot. We have heard over and over again Archer's a pilot. But wouldn't it be more important to have Archer back on Enterprise if something goes wrong with this? Like to lose your captain and your chief engineer, if something is weird with the sphere, or there's more raiders in there, or whatever. Like that would have been a great moment. And then T'Pol and Archer could have been talking to them. It could have been the same scene.
Hmm.
Just instead of Archer, you would have had Travis. And I know it wouldn't. We would have missed our little like look and buddy moment about the O2 sensor, but that would have felt like a way to get him in that, and I would have appreciated that because poor Travis. I mean, this is. I know this is my mantra every episode, but poor Travis.
Well, and in an episode about Hoshi, and one of her
Right,
best friends on the ship is Travis,
right.
we never get a Travis Hoshi episode, right?
I know.
It's like, come on, it's right
I
there.
know.
They're such a
I know.
fun little pair. And to your point, it could have been Travis that encouraged her to go to Phlox, to go
Yeah.
to Archer, right? To
Yep.
not just be in
Yep.
your head about this, but actually, you know what? We're a crew. We're
Yeah.
part of it. And I had to learn that when you grew up on a boomer, as a boomer,
Yep.
you report everything because
Yep.
everyone is important.
I agree. So poor Travis. I mean, I know he'll have some moments later on, but this one felt like a really noticeable absence. I mean, he didn't even
Mhm.
talk the entire episode. No. All right, and now here's one. So when they're in sickbay and Tarkin takes over Flux, like she's feeding the slugs or whatever, the seaweed, and then she looks behind her to see Flux, and suddenly he's there. Is that Tarkin actually taking
Mm-mm.
over Flux, or it's just
Mm-mm.
a projection?
Projection, because he can't.
Okay,
Otherwise, he would be reaching at the Phlox too, and there's just
right. That's
one
what I
mind in a
was
million.
thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking too, and I was like, okay, so that's him just projecting Flux. But then I wish other Flux who was
Mhm.
behind would see Hoshi talking to somebody and be like, wait, something is happening here. Like I feel like that was a smushy part of that scene. Like I
Yes.
didn't
Yes.
quite get how it was working, why it was working. I love that Flux got to be creepy Flux because he does it really well.
Oh yeah.
But I feel like there should have been more clarity to what was going on, or real Flux seeing something happen with Hoshi and going, oh, wait a minute, this is way more serious than we thought because
Mm-hmm.
she's talking to nothing. So that kind of took that down one notch for me because it made me think a lot and it didn't make sense. So
It was fun to watch because of the performance,
correct.
but that was it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And like I said, those are my big decons there, and I just there's just it's constantly something small and little that just was pulling me out just a little bit, going, okay, okay.
Well, I have a
So
big,
yeah,
broad decon.
all right,
Why are, and this is my last one because you covered
okay.
the shuttle
The silly stuff.
pod
Yeah,
and the Hoshi wearing a dress or dresses.
yeah.
Big one. Why are Hoshi episodes driven by like mind games?
Mm,
Right? With Vanishing Point, it's all in her mind. With Exile, there's this mental telepathy situation where we're getting Archer, but it's not Archer. We get Phlox, but it's not Phlox. It's the guy messing with her mind. And then one of my favorite episodes of Enterprise is the Observer Effect.
yeah,
Again, there's mental stuff going on there, body possession. Why are the Hoshi episodes, besides like Silent Enemy, dealing with the mental aspect of her?
yeah, yeah. I mean, we know she's smart, and I love that she was, featured in this because of her mind.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's this interesting little pattern that stuck out this time around.
Especially, I think looking at it now, 2 decades plus past it, and looking at the modern Trek we have now, where those tropes are not as prominent with female characters. It's
Mm-hmm.
good to see that there's growth. I wish Hoshi would have gotten that treatment too.
Indeed. Tonight, we are lucky enough to have a recipient for the Flipping Duras Award. This is bestowed on an as-needed basis to a character who is overwhelmingly and frustratingly annoying, but they do it so well. It's a wow, I want to punch them in the face every time they're on screen type of character. They're not quite the villain, but an annoyance. And it's a character perhaps that sometimes we love to hate. So tonight I have a flippin' Duras. And it's not for the entirety of the character, but it's for certain choices of the character. So it's Tarquin, right?
Yeah, I had a feeling this was coming.
Yeah, it's for when he tricks her by pretending to be Phlox and Archer. That's such a
Yeah,
jerk move. That's
yeah,
a
it is.
jerk. You jerk. Flippin' Duras, you jerk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Just be yourself. Don't that is manipulative. That is really bad. And so when you're making the person question reality, that is crossing a line. And so I had to give the flip and Duras there because that was a jerk move. You jerk. Duras.
Well, I love that we got a Duras in here. And I thought about this one as well because there really are points where he crosses that line and you're like, dude, enough. Like, she's here, she's talking to you, and all the progress that you've made in a respectful relationship disappears then. Like, it's all taken right back. And we've talked about the why, and I get that, but that's an explanation, not an excuse. And that's what makes it different. Like, people talk about gaslighting all the time now, and
Mm-hmm.
that's gaslighting, that's manipulation, that's preying upon somebody's mental state and emotions in a way that is not okay. And yep, he can get a Duras for that one for sure.
Now, I do love how when he's pretending to be Archer, Hoshi's like, yeah, sure, I'll stay for the mission.
Yeah.
Until he's like, but you can't go get your stuff and don't say goodbye to your friends. Like, then she's like, okay. But in that moment, she's willing to sacrifice her her part of the mission. Like, first of all, we want to be part of it, right? Even if it's dangerous, I
Mhm.
want to be part of it. We're part of a team. I want to see it through to the end. Also, I don't want to be here with this creepy guy, but you know what? I will do it for the crew. That says a
Exactly.
lot about her.
Yep.
He's
Yep.
still a flippin' Duras jerk.
Sure is. And you know what? Everybody can have Duras moments. So
Yes.
he gets
Yes.
this one for that. Not a full, like, constant Duras. He is not Duras himself, but he definitely had Duras tendencies in this episode.
Such a Duras. All right.
Well, I have to say, I appreciate that we have got a Duras here. And I know that they're not the characters we love the most, but they paint a fuller picture of the universe because we all know a Duras or two in our real lives. So
And we've
it's
all
nice
been
to see
one.
them pop up. I mean, we have all. been one, and I'm sure we will again.
Mind if we take a look? Prettiest set I ever saw.
Well, we have now come to the beautiful part of our episode, the view screen on, the section where we honor a shot or a graphic or a part of the episode that is just lovely and we want to highlight it. So, Chris, start us off tonight. I have a guess of what you picked.
Oh, interesting. Well, I
Huh.
could have picked the graphics in the command center as they're analyzing the spheres. That's just beautifully designed. It looks so real. But that's not what I chose. What I chose was when Tarquin is projecting as Archer. The shot composition is so unsettling because he's in a mirror and we're in Hoshi's view, and it's just beautifully unsettlingly designed. And I like that kind of mirror shot and for an episode like this.
Yeah, it really helps set the mood to have that unusual shot here. And there's a lot of really unusual shots in this episode. Thank you, Roxanne Dawson, for being amazing. And there's a lot of movement in the shots, which is really nice too, and different. It makes everything feel just that little bit creepier because nothing is really still that often, and that's nice.
Thank you for pointing out Roxanne Dawson because we haven't said her name much, but whatever's wrong with this episode is not the direction. It's
Absolutely
not the
not.
sets. It's not
No.
all the things that the director meets with during pre-production to put into place. And this director, Roxanne Dawson, did a fantastic job. She knew the assignment, make kind of like a gothic novel, and she did it.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, and I almost picked the monitors in the command center, and that was what I was thinking you were going to pick because I mean it's infinite Hoshis, right? You get to see her on the monitor, on the monitor, on the monitor forever back, and they do the echo with the sound, which really makes it cool too. And I like that they're spinning that whole time, and it spins right into the castle, which is a really then it keeps spinning, so it's a very unsettling shot. And I like that shot, but the one that I kept going back to, going, oh, should I pick this? Should I? Yeah, I'm going to. I love the shot when at the beginning the anomalies are coming through the ship and Archer's water polo ball gets stuck in the wall because he's thrown it against the wall, which is so Archer. And then it actually gets stuck like halfway in the wall, which you see that from, the shot where you see Archer and it's stuck in the wall. But then the shot I really like, you see as if you are standing in the wall and you look over the ball that's stuck in the wall. So you see this big yellow like half ball that's stuck, and at first that's in focus and Archer is not, and then the focus changes and you have the ball, the big yellow like half semisphere off, like out of focus, and then you see Archer and his like just face of frustration and resignation, like, hey, we're getting close, aren't we? And it's just that little moment, but it's just such a beautiful moment of Archer and such an unusual shot. I find now that we're looking for these specifically, I really enjoy the shots where no person could actually stand where the camera is, and you're getting these interesting angles. Like nobody's going to be standing in the wall over the water polo ball looking down, but we are in the shot, and it's a different angle than you would normally get, and I like it, and I think it's funny. Like the water polo ball is now in the wall. Sorry, Archer. Time for a new ball.
Well, and I thought about you in that scene immediately because Archer has to be doing something with his hands. Always,
He
right?
sure does. Always.
But I love just the sound of the ball as it's bouncing back and forth, and it just goes.
Yep.
It's tactile and satisfying. So sometimes I wish my son's balls would just stop bouncing.
Yeah, I hear that too. Or somebody recently gave my kids slide whistles.
Oh,
those could get frozen
goodness.
half with her. Yeah. Never give a child a slide whistle, people out there. Like, it's just torture.
Yeah, or recorders.
Oh, yeah. That's fourth grade. Every fourth grader learns how to play a recorder.
Yep. No, we have a trunk of musical instruments in our house. And every other Sunday we have church group over our house, and all these kids that are under 7 get the finger cymbals out and the tambourines.
Yeah.
They're
Oh
just
yeah.
going to town, and we're like, well, I guess we're not talking about the Bible now.
We're having a parade.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. On that note, literally.
Haha. So we have come to the time where we discuss our favorite parts for the episode, our Porthos pick, also known as Chris's Star Trek moment. If our picks were mentioned already in the discussion, we will expand a bit more here. And if they weren't, then we have a few more great moments to discuss. So, Abby, what's your pick for this episode?
All right. So I love that you're like, oh, this is Chris's Star Trek moment. And I'm like, oh, this is where Abby talks about things that she loves because I'm going to talk about the set design specifically in the dinner scene for this one.
Of course. Of
Okay.
course.
Yes, of course, the dinner. Now we'll get to the food in a moment, but I think, and I don't know this, but I cannot imagine that the set designers for this did not just have a field day because this whole set is so different than what they normally do, and it's got so many layers and pieces. Every room has different chairs, different wall hangings, different sculptures, different tableware, different like tapestries, curtains. They just went into the warehouse at Paramount and went, yeah, let's look for everything that looks semi-Gothic. And they threw it all in this castle. And I really like the dinner scene. Like when Hoshi walks in, she goes, do you eat like this all the time? And he's like, yeah, no, only when I have company. And you see like all the things that are out there. And now, granted, we've got a fabulous dinner. He's probed her mind for all her favorites and tried to recreate them. And I like that we know that Hoshi is a fan of pineapple pizza. I am also a fan of pineapple pizza, so I appreciate that. She's got some good mac and cheese. She's got a burger. Like she's gonna have a bellyache if she eats all this. The crazy dessert, like I like that he brought something else and then called her out. And the reference to soba noodles, which are a favorite around here, like that's just Abby loving Enterprise food. But when you look at the plates, the glasses, the silverware, the napkins, and the whole castle is like this. It's full of all these little bits and pieces in the background. And when I watched and was looking at background stuff, I was just like, this is just neat. And some of the pieces are really cool, and nowhere more than that dining room scene where you can see all this. And I was like, this, it could feel like it's too much until you realize this guy has been there for hundreds of years and he's bored as all get out. Now, does that mean everything is replicated? Maybe. But I mean, if you have nothing else to do for centuries, you're probably over decorating your house too, simply because you have nothing else to do. And I think that makes it feel more like that it's very full, this castle. There's no spaces. Exactly. It doesn't have big gaping corridors. Even the gardens are full of little sculptures and fountains and different plants and all, because he's had to do something with all this time. So he's filled the house. And I found, once I thought about that, I'm like, you know what? That really is a whole nother layer to this character. And it feels like it's right. If you don't have people, then you try to comfort yourself with your surroundings and your stuff. And it was just really well done. Everything was different. I mean, the only things, like if they're at the table in the dining room, the chairs are the same there, but they're not the same chairs as anywhere else in that castle. And so I really appreciate the amount of work and detail that went into this design, specifically the dinner one, because of all of the wonderful food and all of the accessories and plateware that went with it. It was a beautiful moment.
And I just love that in TOS, we have to explain why Trelane has this 19th century castle aesthetic going on, but we don't care here. We just do it.
Yep.
And it's glorious. And the reason it has to be there's so much depth and props everywhere, because that creates that Gothic sensibility of there's mystery. There's so much here. There's so much to explore. We can't see it all, but that's part of the fun. And that's just like in our minds creating the atmosphere without us even noticing it. So I really love the attention to detail. So I'm glad that you picked that.
I had to. Very on brand.
Definitely did.
Now you get to be on brand. What's your Star Trek moment for this one? AKA your Porthos pick.
Well, I don't know if it's really the Star Trek moment. It's just often what it is, but But I love that we get insight into Hoshi's isolation even from childhood.
Yeah.
That like she had tutors, like her parents recognize she's gifted with languages, and so they help that flourish, they nourish that. But the trade-off is she's isolated, and she thought that was
Yep.
normal actually, which is sad,
Yeah.
right? But not unusual. Like I've had students that way. And so I found this was a really good organic way to learn more about who Hoshi is, like the core of the character. And it also goes like she's so quiet, and we complained this season there's not a lot of Hoshi, right? But
Hmm.
it's because she's the quiet, thoughtful one. And because of that, when she speaks up, Archer listens.
Exactly.
And that's why he
Yep.
listens this episode, because she doesn't speak up much. But when she does, it's worth listening to. Um, so I love that we get to see how isolated she is, but also the episode shows she has these few meaningful connections on Enterprise, specifically Phlox and Archer we see in this episode, and we hear about Travis in this episode. We don't see that enough. You know, I think we're still holding on to that one dinner scene when they're in the background and Dead stops. We're just holding on to that.
They have dinner together more often than that, but
You're
yes,
right.
I
You're
mean,
right.
yeah.
That's the visual that stays in my head of this
Yes.
too.
Yes.
But yeah, that's my pick. That we learn this deep insight into the character that explains retroactively a lot of the character coming before it and then going after.
Yeah, and it's such a nice deep glimpse into Hoshi, and it's one of those things where you can see her react because when Tarkin starts bringing it up, this is hitting her to the core. This is like a fundamental piece of her. It's part of her truth, and for him to just come out like that, and for her to feel kind of taken aback because that's not something that you usually talk to about with anybody, let alone someone you've known for 2 days.
It's the first
So,
date, right? Like they're going to
yeah,
dinner for the
exactly.
first time. Hey, I made all of your favorite meals, and by
Yeah,
the way, here's your core flaw, or
yeah,
your core
exactly.
traumatic pain.
Yeah. You forget I know so much about you, and you're like, right, so that's a little much, a little
But
fast.
it's interesting that like she's isolated in a different way than Reed is.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a
Yep.
similar situation, but very different. And I'm not sure how to say that with words yet, besides that. But I like that there's two different flavors of isolated characters.
And I would almost even put in there that occasionally we see Archer like that because he doesn't have a peer. And we've talked about that. Like he doesn't have
Mm,
another captain. He's got Trip, he's got Phlox, he's got T'Pol, but it's not somebody who's his equal. So there are times when he feels that isolation as well because of his position, his rank. So it's interesting to think about that as like a full picture of different types of being alone.
all he has are funeral and the rain fantasies. That's all he has. When one
Oh,
goes for a
Archer.
long time without sexual intercourse, whatever Flock
And then
says.
the umbrellas. Yeah. So it's just interesting. And it's interesting that, we talk how much we love this crew coming together, being unified, supporting each
Mhm,
other in scaffolding, but they all do have these, and not necessarily even all, but like we talk about Trip and T'Pol coming together too, and finding that
mhm,
connection, and Trip coming out of his isolating, righteous anger that he's sitting in,
mm,
T'Pol coming out of her Vulcanness. Like there's so many people, and that's being human. That's the condition of being alive,
mm,
is
mm.
that everybody is alone in some parts of themselves, and when those deep lonely parts are brought to light, it can be really powerful in many different ways. And I think that's going to be an interesting theme to explore as we continue to go on for this season and next.
Yeah, the people around us help us become the fullest version of ourselves. And I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Starfleet shows demonstrate that concept. And since this is the first like major crew on deep space assignment, they're learning this slowly but surely. Saying that as someone who just finished Prodigy season 2, where that's a major theme, stay together, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Accessing library computer data.
Well, here on First Flight, we love trivia and behind the scenes tidbits and all those little things that give us the full picture of making this show. So we pick a few to share, and I'm going to start tonight. So I have a really short one here that I just thought was kind of interesting and shows us how far we've come. This was the first episode of Star Trek to air in high definition.
So we could see all those props and the amazing set.
Exactly. We could see all those props. And it makes you feel like, oh, that was longer ago than I thought, but also not as long as I thought. Like it makes time feel kind of interesting. But of all the episodes to start in high def, at least we did one that had a lot to look at, right?
21 years ago.
I know, crazy. And another first for this one that I really liked. So second. Okay. After the High Ground, which was in 1990, the TNG episode, that episode was written by Melinda M. Snodgrass and directed by Gabrielle Beaumont. This is only the second episode of the Star Trek franchise to date to be completely written and directed by women. So that's Phyllis Strong was the writer and Roxanne Dawson, respectively, all women in the creative end of that. And all other Star Trek episodes to this date, and this is the very beginning of July 2024, had the episodes that were directed by women were written by men or men and women as a co-writing team. And I think that's very interesting. And I think to have this type of episode written and directed by women is why it didn't stray into some of those
it didn't sexualize the plot.
Exactly. And I think that that's important. And I'm not saying that men could not have done the same thing, but I think that it was really nice to have that female perspective be centered in this episode.
Yeah, there was no male gaze going on, or very little. Despite the efforts of the production to put her in certain types of costumes, it didn't come across that way.
I agree. All right, so what's your trivia for tonight?
All right, two. So first one, back to Shinzon. Honestly, the stained glass windows seen in Tarquin's castle are taken from Shinzon's dining room on Romulus from Star Trek Nemesis. And then we also have the chairs in the castle were used previously on Ventax 2 in The Devil's Due from Next Generation.
Well, no surprise, they needed a lot of chairs for this one. So
Yep.
We even mentioned the chairs. They're cool looking chairs. I want to go back and watch that episode and be like, oh yeah, there's the chairs.
We'll just wait for Yerk to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
But then my last piece of trivia, this is a bigger one and kind of Star Trek adjacent. It's looking into the name Tarquin. So Tarquin was a family of Roman kings in the 6th century BC. They were not of the same ethnicity as the Romans that they ruled, as they came from the neighboring region of Etruria, right?
Sure. Yes. I
All
have
right.
no idea.
Well, they're called the Etruscans, and I recognize that name, Etruscans.
Yes.
And they were later assimilated into the Roman culture and ceased to exist as a distinct identity, which is fascinating. The Tarquins were held up in Roman history as the worst examples of brutal tyrants. So not really exactly tying in with our guy here, but interesting. The Tarquin name was also the namesake of another science fiction icon, the cruel Admiral Wilhuff Tarkin, in the original Star Wars movie, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, otherwise known as Star Wars.
Yeah, there you go. Interesting how this all kind of comes full circle like that.
Yeah, and that name really does a lot more align with the character of Tarkin in Star Wars than Tarquin here. But I just, the historicity of that name makes this set feel a little more appropriate, right? Having that historical, I don't know if I used historicity right, but I used it. There you go.
It's a great word.
Check me later.
Well, and it's nice to see the inspiration behind things. It's interesting because it's seeing that thought process again. And I like those connections. It's the out of universe kind of bigger picture. That's fun to see.
Yeah.
Okay, so one time Boimler dragged me to the Starship History Museum.
Dragged? You ran up to the doors.
No, I didn't. It was boring. I hated it. Anyway, so they had the NX-01 there, Archer's Enterprise.
Yeah, classic design. Plus it had, the grapplers.
Skip that part, they don't care.
I love grapplers.
See?
Well, it's come to the time for our final thoughts and grappler ratings. Abby, on a scale of 1 to 10 grapplers, how do you rate this episode?
So I know we were both talking before we were recording and saying, yeah, it might go up after this. And I'm like, yeah, I have a range. And I think what I've settled on is that this episode is a 6.5 for me. It's not by any means extinction. It's not fantastic. It's not there's just too many little pieces that aren't quite what I wanted them to be. So many places that it could have been a little more or not. But at the same time, there's such a good look into Hoshi, such good connections to other episodes. The spheres, I can't knock the fact that the spheres are in here. And we have a super enterprisey antagonist here who's he's not good or bad. He's living in that between. And I like this episode more now that I have watched it for the pod than I did before. This is one that I would have beforehand said, yeah, this is bottom rung. And I don't think it's bottom rung. I don't think it's top rung, but I don't think it's bottom rung. I wished it had been more, but it was not bad for what it was. And none of it made me uncomfortable. Sometimes, and I mean that in a squicky or icky or just I don't like this kind of way, not even in the uncomfortableness of ideas. None of this was in there, and I like that. So I think I'm settling on a 6.5 for this one. I'm sad that Hoshi episodes have tended to fall on the bottom of my rankings, but I think it's fair. All right, you're up. What's your number?
Well, I told you before we started recording, I believe, that I had a number and I was pretty sure it was going to increase after our conversation. And guess what?
It did.
Because I had it originally as a 6, but it's definitely 6.5.
Look at us lighting up again.
Right. Because of the strong Hoshi content, the sphere aspect is really just engaging because of this thread of mystery that's going over time throughout the season. And it didn't have the over-sexualized gaze and, track that it could have gone on. So I think this is a decent Hoshi episode. Is it my favorite? No, like you said, but I'm not going to skip it from now on. I've always skipped this one. I've probably seen it twice before I watched it for this podcast. And now I've doubled that. So I watched it twice for the podcast. And going in, I was like, I'm only watching this once. But I was like, you know what? I can do this more. I can watch this more. And now whenever I do a season 3 rewatch, I will not skip this one because it's worthwhile. It's not it's slow, but it's worthwhile. And again, it has that connective tissue right to the shipment, which is a great episode. So I think it's an important part of the Enterprise story, and it's a 6.5.
I love it when we line up like that.
Yeah, we have not differed much this season.
Well, we got things coming still.
Yep.
And I guess that means that the season is consistent, right? We're finding the same things out of it, and maybe that means that the message is coming across better than it has in the past because there's less variation on our end, or maybe we're just coming more in sync. Who knows?
Oh, and if you take out Extinction, this is our lowest episode rating so far, 6.5. The rest have been 7 and above, which means this is pretty solid.
Yeah, it's a good season. People call it out for a reason.
Yeah.
All right, so now we've gotten our grapplers and we've realized that this episode has got a lot of good stuff in it. So before we finish up, let's go through a quick recap of all of our pros for Exile. So run us through your picks, Chris.
All right. My first pro is the sphere plot. My second pro is that Archer trusts Hoshi by posting security around the ship and also diverting the ship's course during an intense mission just on Hoshi's word. And then my third pro is Hoshi's ability to resist and firmly define her boundaries with Tarquin. My view screen on is that that shot composition with fake Archer coming in the mirror behind Hoshi, just making us feel unsettled. And my Porthos pick is just learning about Hoshi's childhood and her core character trait of being isolated, because of how bright she is, and that she grew up with isolation that is just part of her character. And you take us through your beautiful set of prose.
All right. So my first one were the little bits of Archer and his connections with various members of the crew throughout the episode, and we see those moments for Archer to take a breath in this episode. My second was the connection and the consistency of how this episode fits into the whole arc of Hoshi and her storyline that we've seen so far and what we know is to come. My third is that Tarquin is that polymorphic villain. He's such an Enterprise, well, not even villain, antagonist, because he's got so many layers and he's just not one thing, just not good, just not bad. My view screen is that shot over the water polo ball, looking down at Archer when it gets stuck in the anomaly.
Love it.
And it's such a fun one. And my Porthos pick is the set design of the castle itself, but specifically the dinner scene and all that lovely food in there.
Great list.
It is.
I love how we can find great things in episodes like this.
Yeah. Well, all Trek has good meaning and good parts in it.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have your communicator? The people the Suliban were working for came from about 300 years ago. They couldn't travel through time, but they did develop a way to send back images of themselves, to communicate through time.
You wanted a chance to communicate? I suggest you begin.
So if you want to talk to us about some of your favorite parts, we want to remind you that we adore getting feedback and thoughts from you, our Carrot crew, and our mailbag show is coming up. We have had so much fun sharing, laughing, discussing your insights, your ideas, your thoughts, your things that you notice in the background in this one. I'm sure there's stuff that we didn't see. We've had chats on all the social media platforms with so many of you, and we're collecting. So this is your call. Grappler ratings, Porthos picks, general comments, flippin' Duras, VAMF, the Vulcan as a mother, flippers. Get them to us so you can be part of our mailbag episode fun that's coming up.
Yes, please do reach out to us and share any thoughts or smiles that you have for us using the hashtag Carrot Crew. And, you know, like we recently got a massive DM from one of our listeners.
Yes.
That was just a wonderful essay, almost mini essay.
Yeah.
If you share in a DM, which we encourage, just let us know if we can use that in the mailbag too, because we don't want to share something that you intended to just be to us. But also we're teachers. We love sharing others' ideas because it enriches all of us. So let us know and let us have some awesome DMs and tweets from you on Facebook or on all the other socials. Okay, so you can reach us at First Flight Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Facebook. We're also on YouTube under the Tricorder Transmissions Network. You can also please email us a 90-second or less voice memo with your thoughts as well. And you can send that to firstflightpod@gmail.com. We want to feature your voice on our shows because that's what we do. We're teachers. Again, we want all the voices at the table. And isn't that the most Enterprise thing? People talking around a table.
It is. Absolutely.
We just won't chew food while we talk to you. Because we like it.
Imaginary or not.
Yes. All right. So you can reach me personally at Shelf Nerds on Twitter or on my YouTube channel, Completing the Shelf. Abby, where's the best place we can reach you?
All right. So I'm guessing I'm a bitter ender on Twitter now because it's rapidly changing, but I'm still there more than anywhere else. So that's Abby M Summer. That's SOMMER. I've been doing a little bit more on Blue Sky. I'm working my way into it, but those are the places to find me the best.
Well, we want to thank you for spending this time with us. We'll be back next time with The Shipment, the 7th episode of season 3. I love The Shipment, man. All-time great.
We're getting to some really good ones this next chunk.
Definitely are. Okay. So to get there, we have to leave you now. So we're going to leave you now with this quote from Captain Jonathan Archer, read by our friend Melanie. This is your moment of Melanie.
The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us, woven into the threads that bind us, all of us, to each other.
Viewscreen. If nothing else lasts from this podcast but that, I'll be fine. Because it's so funny every time.
Yep.
All right. Viewscreen soundbite.
And tonight we are discussing Exile, the 6th episode. It got me because it's been a month.
I know. Sorry, but not.
It's just the mark of friendship.
It 100% is. Inside
6
jokes.
ND. That's wonderful. Okay.
The poetry soundbite. I love that that's in there now, by the way.
What is poetry?
And I just imagine, what's his head? It starts with an M. With the
Mathis?
the weird
Mathis?
hair.
Mathis?
Yes,
Yeah.
Mathis. With the weird hair and like the things on the side. And I'm like, whew. And Deanna in that fabulous dress.
Mm-hmm.
But, all right.
Okay.
Yeah, that one's not nearly as bad as Extinction.
No. Although we still had great stuff to come out of Extinction too in our conversation.
That's true. I'm never going to not watch Enterprise and look for Archer squatting and doing his quad days. Like in that episode, maybe more than any other one. And I have not really watched the rest of the season and next with that focus before, but
yes,
I can't imagine there would be more squatting than there would in that episode.
No, that's pretty much a squat one. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Oh, man. Flipping Duras.